What's good? Welcome in. You're watching Philadelphia 76ers Now by Chat Sports. I'm Chase Sr., and no matter where you are, how you're tuned, we appreciate you, as always, for tuning into the show. There are so many options on YouTube to get your Sixers content, so for you to be here, I do appreciate that. As for what we're talking about on the show, a bunch of new information out on Bradley Beal from Charania and Adrian Wojnarowski, as well as some local sources on the Sixers front as it pertains to Bradley Beal. The Wizards going to work with Beal to find a trade partner, and it looks as though a trade could happen, but not only that, a trade could happen very, very quickly. So Charania of The Athletic with this, that the Wizards and Beal have mutual interest to work together on finding a trade. Beal is the only player in the NBA with a full no-trade clause. So he can literally determine where he goes, and that no-trade clause is transferable to his new organization. And the Miami Heat have emerged as a prominent destination for Beal right after they lost in the NBA Finals. And it's clear for Miami, they basically tapped out with that roster, right? They maxed out. You can have 7 UDFAs, you can be an 8 seed that makes it to the NBA Finals, but can you realistically win? Probably not. You need another player who can move the needle, so it would make sense why you would pair up Jimmy Butler with Bradley Beal to chase that championship. Here is that report from Shams Charania on this fine Wednesday. It is unclear whether the Wizards will ultimately decide upon a rebuild or if they find an acceptable trade. But sources said that both sides are working amicably to find the path forward with the 2023 NBA Draft looming on June 22nd. The sources, who were granted anonymity because they were not authorized to discuss the matter, said the Miami Heat are expected to be prominent suitors for Beal if he reaches the market. And you know one thing about Pat Riley, he is always aggressive in trying to attract superstars and bring them down to South Beach. Now, the Sixers would have a decision to make. Daryl Morey obviously is infatuated with James Harden. He traded for him with the Houston Rockets, did it again with Philadelphia. They could bring him back, and everything that I've been hearing is that the Sixers would like to bring back Harden. But if you had to pick between these two star players here, who would you go with? James Harden at 33, Bradley Beal at 30, also a different position at that two-guard wing spot. Let me know down in the comment section. As for what Woj had to say about Beal, with the NBA draft coming up on June 22nd and free agency commencing on July 1, conversations on Beal's future with the Wizards are expected to become more frequent, sources said. Here is my prediction as far as Bradley Beal goes. I think that Beal gets dealt before the draft. I think an organization wants to know, okay, going into the draft, do we have to make a pick? Do we have to trade up? Do we have to trade that pick for somebody else? Or do we make a trade for Bradley Beal and then going into the draft, we understand what our roster construction is going to be? Now, coming up next, we're going to take a look at some advanced shooting numbers for Bradley Beal. You don't want to miss it. But first, make sure you hit that subscribe button or, like the Philly homies say, hit that sub John. Because whenever the Sixers make a big move, we cover it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Sixers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 subscribe. Beal's numbers over the last 4 years. He is a pure bucket getter who can find twine from anywhere on the floor. He is a 3-level hyper scorer who's also a really good athlete. What I like about Beal is that he doesn't need the basketball to score. He can come off the screen. He can be a catch-and-shoot player. More on that coming up. But the last 4 years, obviously none better than 2019 and 2020, when he poured in more than 30 points per game, and the shooting number's pretty good, hovering right around 35%. The numbers the last 2 years did go down. Now, keep in mind, he was playing with an injured wrist back in 2021, 2022. That's why he only tallied 40 games. According to reports, Joel Embiid wanted Beal over Harden, but because Beal had to get that season-ending wrist surgery, the Sixers went with Harden, and then this past year played in 50 games, and the numbers were pretty solid. 23 points per game. It's not 30, but the field goal numbers did go back up to just shy of 51% from the deck and then nearly 37% from beyond the arc. His career playoff numbers. What I would be concerned about if I'm Philadelphia is the fact that he has never advanced past the second round. So if you're in a tight series in the pressure cooker of TD Garden in Boston, you're playing against a Miami Heat team. This is a Sixers organization that's had an enabling culture since the process. They've choked time and time in the playoffs, whether it be to an inferior opponent like the Atlanta Hawks or losing a series lead like they did to the Raptors in 2019 or this past year to the Boston Celtics. Would Bradley Beal, because he's not accustomed to playing in a lot of these big moments, also kind of falter in some of these big games? I think Nick Nurse does a good job of holding his players accountable, having a culture that is tough-minded, where he would divert Bradley Beal from falling into that mental trap, but it is a little bit of a concern nonetheless. I do want to ask you this question because I'm actually fascinated to see a lot of people say, I don't want Bradley Beal. He sucks. Is Beal an elite player? Type G for good, A for average, or E for elite? Where do you think he ranks? As far as his advanced shooting numbers, Bradley Beal, I think, is one of the best offensive players in the NBA because he can dribble into his shot. He shot more than 50% from three-pointers when he had 7+ dribbles. He can come off screens. He can create for himself by getting into that mid-range area. He can get to the rim, but also he has every offensive move in his pocket, whether it be a step back, a sidestep, and he can also hit contested shots as well. And I do think these advanced shooting numbers do tell a pretty significant story. On catch-and-shoot three-pointers last year, he shot 40%. On pull-up three-pointers, 33%. So that, not great at all. Less than 10 feet, though, he was about 60.2% on his field goals, and that did rank 23rd in the NBA. I also have some more Bradley Beal numbers now that I think about it that I can relate to the audience here with what Beal did last year. This coming from Jason Timpf of The Volume. Beal made 3.5 shots per game in the restricted area at 71.5%. That ranked 4th among players 6'5" or shorter in the league, behind Ja Morant, Anthony Edwards, and Keldon Johnson. He was the only guy in that group who finished higher than 65%. That's pretty notable. He also shot 54% on floaters. That ranked 10th out of 110 players who attempted at least 50 last year. That's significant. And among 47 players who attempted at least 300 pull-up jumpers, Beal ranked 18th in efficiency at more than 1 point per possession. So the advanced numbers for Beal do indicate, like I said, that he's a pretty elite offensive player. The contract is no doubt a problem because he's 30 years old right now, and with the new CBA checking in, it would be hard for the Sixers to have Embiid on a max, Beal on a max, maybe Tyrese Maxey on a max, and build out the roster outside of that, because these figures no doubt are very high. But at the same time, the NBA salary cap, you have to figure, is going to continue to rise over the next couple of years as well. So you're going to be able to absorb some of these large cap numbers as well. And Joshua Harris, look, take a lesson from Stan Kroenke, who hires smart people, he invests in his teams, and he's very aggressive. He won a title with the Los Angeles Rams. He won a title with the Colorado Avalanche. He won a title with the Denver Nuggets. If you want to win, you have to pay for premium talent. And if you want to win, you got to pay for a player like Bradley Beal. That no trade clause, as I said, is transferable for Bradley Beal. So that would transfer to his new team. For instance, if he gets traded to the Sixers, he would still have that full no trade clause. He could pick the destination that he wants to go to. And there's been chatter in years past that he'd like to play with the Sixers. He'd like to play next to Joel Embiid. And Joel Embiid would like to play alongside Bradley Beal. As for the destinations that I think make sense, there are 3 for me. The Miami Heat, for the reasons that we talked about a little bit earlier. The New York Knicks, because they can give up a lot in a haul for Bradley Beal. Then it's the Sixers. And remember the other day we talked about this report from Bill Simmons when he said, my odds-on favorite, I would put them at minus 200, would be Philadelphia. Philadelphia, the favorites to land Bradley Beal. And I don't think it's even close, he said. Beal and Joel Embiid, they are friends. Embiid was trying to get him 2 years ago, which I kept telling people on this podcast. They ended up going with Harden instead. Embiid was pushing hard for Beal. Harden is going to leave. So that's the report, or at least the guesstimate from Bill Simmons, there is this report from a local Sixers insider and John Clark, a.k.a. Airport Johnny, who always has a good pulse on all things Philadelphia sports. And he reported this today, that it's my understanding the Sixers probably will not be a suitor for Bradley Beal. He has a big contract for a lot of money, and with the new CBA with aprons that does not allow for much flexibility for roster building, and the Sixers believe that Tyrese Maxey can be an all-star caliber player. So John Clark reporting that. So let me ask you this question. Should the Sixers trade for Bradley Beal? Voice your opinions down in the comments section by giving me a Y for yes or an N for no. Let me know down below. We appreciate all of you for watching. Do we have those Maxey stats too? Let's take a look at Tyrese Maxey's stats as well, because can Tyrese Maxey be that legitimate co-star next to Joel Embiid? His growth, it's certainly been on display in his first 3 years. And I think for the Sixers, a lot of their decisions this offseason do stem from what they believe Maxey can become. Can he become Joel Embiid's Jamal Murray? Can he become a superstar? The first 3 years of his career have been actually better than Jamal Murray's first 3 years. Now, Murray has taken that leap to be a legit number 2. Maxey's on the precipice of that, but to go from 8 points per game to 17.5 to 20, and then for his field goal numbers to rise, and most importantly, his three-point numbers to increase like that, that does tell a pretty significant story as well. And do we have the Maxey advanced shooting numbers too, Coop? Because his advanced shooting numbers are also pretty important for Maxey if they do believe that he can be the number 2 for this team. I just get frustrated at the thought of James Harden coming back because I believe that the offense gets a little bit too stale when he's running point. And Doc Rivers on a podcast with the aforementioned Bill Simmons did say early in the year when Harden was deferring as a pass-first guy, our offense was better. But then we kind of clashed because I wanted him to play that way, and Harden reverted back to scoring. At 33 years old, he's not the scorer that he once was, and because of that, that's why that Sixers offense got stagnant. For Maxey and his advanced shooting numbers, catch and shoot on three-pointers, 45.5%, on pull-up threes, nearly 39%, less than 10 feet on his field goals, 55%. We know he has that floater game to his package. Overall ranking among qualifying players in the NBA, 7th. Pretty notable right there. So grade Beal as a player, A, B, C, D, or F. A lot of good questions for you to think about on the show today. We want you to show off that basketball intellect.